The grand orrery of the glyptal consensus hummed with a silence more profound than any sound. It was a silence born of immensity, of countless worlds held in delicate gravitational balance by shimmering fields of coherent light, each star a captured diamond, each nebula a swirl of captive smoke. Here, in the heart of an empire that measured its age in geological epochs, the weight of history was a physical presence, pressing down on the shoulders of those who gathered in the obsidian chamber. The air itself felt ancient, filtered through crystalline lattices that had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. At the center of this cavernous space, suspended in a sphere of absolute black, floated the image of a solitary, unremarkable star system, its third planet a swirl of insolent blue and white. It was a world that, until recently, had been a footnote in the most obscure stellar cartography indexes, a primitive cradle of chaotic, short-lived organisms. Now it was the fulcrum upon which the fate of the consensus threatened to pivot. Grand Executor Valerius, his form a testament to centuries of gene sculpting and life extension therapies, rested his 4 slender hands upon the polished obsidian of the council dais. His multifaceted eyes, usually placid pools of ancient wisdom, were clouded with a disquiet that resonated through the chamber. He gazed not at the holographic planet, but at the faces of his most trusted advisors, each representing a pillar of their vast, sprawling civilization. There was Marshal Kalen of the Cathar, his carapaced form rigid with martial discipline, his mandibles clicking softly in a rhythm of barely suppressed impatience. His people were the sword and shield of the consensus, warriors who understood the universe in terms of threat vectors and strategic assets. Opposite him, Ethel of the Lumina hovered a hand's breadth above their designated seat, their body a column of softly glowing, ever-shifting light, a being of energy and intellect that perceived reality as a symphony of frequencies and intentions. And there were others, the silent archivists, the stoic engineers, the bio-shamans, the collective mind of a galactic superpower. The fleet holds its position at the edge of the heliopause. Valerius's voice was a low, resonant chord that seemed to emanate from the chamber itself. Their preliminary scans confirm what the deep-range auguries suggested. A single dominant sentient species, technologically adolescent, they have only just begun to manipulate the atom and clumsily ply the void within their own system. By all metrics, they are insignificant. He paused, letting the statement hang in the cold, still air. And yet the warning persists. Marshal Kalen shifted, the sound of his armored plates scraping against the dais a discordant note in the chamber's harmony. A warning from a dead race, Grand Executor. The silicates were dust before our first star sail unfurled. Their final transmission was a cascade of incoherent data screams, a death rattle from a civilization that failed to adapt. To base the strategic posture of the entire consensus on a ghost's whisper is imprudent. His logic was, as always, as sharp and unyielding as a shard of forged metal. The Cathar did not believe in ghosts. They believed in firepower, orbital supremacy, and the tangible reality of force projection. The silicates did not fail to adapt, Marshal. Ethel's voice was not sound, but a direct psychic resonance, a chorus of crystalline chimes that vibrated within the minds of all present. They chose to end. Their final message was not incoherent. It was filtered, compressed, a final act of terrible clarity. We of the Lumina have spent generations unraveling its core precepts. The message speaks of a cradle that is also a cage. It speaks of a deceptive quiet. It warns not of a fleet, nor a weapon, but of a conceptual trap. Kalen's mandibles clicked faster, a clear sign of agitation. Conceptual trap? What foolishness is this? A rock is a rock. A species is a collection of biological units. We have encountered 1,000 worlds, 1,000 species. We have uplifted them, integrated them, or when necessary, pacified them. This one, this Earth, as they call it, will be no different. Their broadcast signals are a chaotic storm of self-aggrandizing fiction, primitive tribal conflicts, and sentimental noise. They are children throwing stones in a dark forest, unaware of the predators that listen. The only trap here is the one we are setting for ourselves through this inaction. The Grand Executor turned his gaze to the swirling blue marble in the orrery. It looked so peaceful, so fragile. It was a world of oceans and clouds, a jewel of life in the cold void. The reports from the observation fleet were maddeningly contradictory. Scans revealed cities of metal and glass, yet vast swathes of the planet remained untouched, a wilderness of raw, untamed biology. They pose. Possessed crude fission weapons capable of sterilizing their own world, yet they expended vast resources on art, on music, on stories. Their communication networks were a cacophony of languages, ideologies, and beliefs, all clashing, all competing. There was no unity, no consensus, no single guiding principle. They were a species at war with itself. How could such a fractured, self-destructive race possibly constitute a threat, let alone a trap? The Marshal's point is well made, Valerius conceded, his voice heavy with the burden of decision. Our protocols are clear. A precontact species exhibiting Fissionera technology and no unified governance is designated a grade THRE Chinese letter hazard. The standard procedure is containment and observation until they either unify or self-annihilate. But the silicate warning, it specifically names this star, this planet. It is the only specific coordinate in a testament of cosmic despair. Perhaps the trap is its seeming insignificance, Ethel resonated, their light pulsing with gentle insistence. We of the consensus value order, logic, and predictability. We analyze, we categorize, we act based on verifiable data. This species, these humans, defy categorization. Their behavior is not logical. It is a storm of emergent, chaotic properties. They value sacrifice, a concept anathema to a hive mind. They champion the individual, a flaw in any collective. They create beauty from suffering. They find strength in their own mortality. We look upon them and see weakness, chaos, a failed experiment. The warning suggests that what we perceive as their greatest flaws may, in fact, be the jaws of the trap. The chamber fell silent again, the weight of Ethel's words settling upon them. The Cathar saw a primitive world ripe for pacification. The engineers saw resources to be catalogued. The diplomats saw a chaotic society to be stabilized. But the Lumina, who saw the universe as a weave of thought and consequence, saw something else entirely. They saw a design, a purpose hidden beneath the noise. Marshal Kalen took a step forward, his shadow falling long and sharp across the polished floor. Then let us spring this so-called trap. Let the observation fleet make a low orbital pass, a demonstration of our scale, our technology. We will broadcast the anthem of unity. They will see our power, our coherence. Their chaotic systems will either collapse in fear or bow in awe. Their reaction will give us the data we need. We will resolve this ambiguity with overwhelming clarity. A show of force against a species that glorifies conflict? Ethel's resonance was sharp with alarm. Marshal, you would be feeding the very beast you seek to tame. You would be validating their most primal, destructive instincts. To them, your anthem of unity will sound like a declaration of war. That is their nature. They find meaning in struggle. Meaning is irrelevant, Kalen countered, his voice a low growl. Survival is not. They are not fools. They will understand the disparity in power. They will comprehend their own extinction as a mathematical certainty. Logic will prevail. But what if their logic is different from ours? Ethel pressed. What if, when faced with extinction, they do not surrender? What if they choose to detonate their entire world's arsenal, not in the hope of victory, but as a final act of defiance? What if their final gesture is to take the board with them as they fall? The trap is not that we might lose a battle. The trap is that we might be drawn into a conflict that has no victory condition we can comprehend. Valerius raised a hand and the debate ceased. His gaze was fixed on the blue planet. He felt it then, a cold dread that had nothing to do with fleets or weapons. It was the fear of the unknown, the terror of a paradigm shift. His empire, for all its power, was built on a foundation of known principles. It was a machine of exquisite logic and precision. But what if they had encountered something that was not a machine? What if they had found something that was, by its very nature, illogical? The silicates had been a species of pure logic, crystalline beings of perfect computation. And they had chosen extinction rather than face what they had found here. We have held our position for a full rotation of their world, the Grand Executor said, his voice now imbued with a chilling finality. We have debated, we have theorized, but we have learned nothing. The ambiguity remains. The Marshal is correct on one point. Inaction is a decision in itself, and it is breeding fear within this council. We will not, however, make a show of force. We will make a show of peace. That in itself will be a test. He turned to his communications aide. Transmit a message. Use their most common mathematical language, a sequence of prime numbers followed by the fundamental constants of the universe, a greeting of shared reality. We will show them that we are thinkers, not just warriors. We will invite them to speak. We will see how these chaotic children respond to a hand offered in peace. The aide bowed, his slender digits flying across a console of light. The order was sent, traversing the immense distance to the fleet in the blink of an eye. In the obsidian chamber, the council waited. The fate of an empire, the culmination of 1,000,000 years of civilization, held its breath, waiting for a reply from a world of chaos, a world that might be a cradle, a cage, or a grave. A deep, resonant chime echoed through the hall. A reply. It had come almost instantly, far faster than their models predicted. The aide's face was a mask of disbelief. "Grand Executor," he stammered, his voice trembling. "We have a response. It is audio and visual." "On the orrery," Valerius commanded, his own circulatory fluids running cold. The blue planet in the center of the chamber dissolved, replaced by a single, stable image. It was a humanoid face, old, lined with what their translators identified as weariness and patience. The being was clad in simple, dark fabric. It was seated in a room that was stark, functional, and devoid of any of the grandeur of the obsidian chamber. There was a window behind it, showing the black of space and the gentle curve of the blue world below. The being was in orbit. He was already waiting for them. Then the voice came, translated by their systems into the formal tongue of the glyptal consensus, but carrying with it an undertone of calm resonance that was utterly alien. "We are aware of your presence," the human said, his eyes meeting the gazes of the council members as if he could see them across the light years. "You have been there for some time. We appreciate your patience. My name is Ambassador Thorn. We have been expecting you. We invite you to speak." The silence that followed was absolute. The Cathar warrior Marshal Kalen stood frozen, his martial certainty shattered. They had been observed. Their vast, stealth-shrouded fleet, the pride of the consensus, had been monitored by a species that still used chemical rockets. The trap had not been sprung. It had simply opened its eyes and acknowledged their presence. And in that moment, in the calm, knowing gaze of the human, Grand Executor Valerius felt the first true tremor of existential fear. The final hour had not begun with a bang, but with a quiet, polite, and terrifyingly self-assured invitation. The holographic form of Ambassador Thorn remained projected in the center of the orrery, a pillar of calm amidst the storm of glyptal confusion. His image was flawlessly rendered, his posture relaxed, his expression one of serene neutrality. It was this very placidity that was so unnerving. There was no fear, no awe, no aggression. He looked upon the assembled leaders of a galactic empire with the polite attentiveness of a scholar addressing his peers. The glyptal fleet, a force capable of cracking continents and extinguishing suns, was holding at the system's edge, and this lone human spoke as if he were hosting a diplomatic luncheon. Marshal Kalen was the first to recover his composure, channeling his shock into disciplined analysis. "It is a bluff," he growled, his voice low so that only the inner council could hear. "A pre-recorded message triggered by our transmission. Their sensors must have detected our fleet's gravitational displacement. They are attempting to project an image of strength to mask their terror." "The transmission lag is negligible," the communications aide countered, his voice a nervous whisper. "The exchange was virtually instantaneous. To reply so quickly with a tailored, translated message, their computational capacity is far greater than our scans indicated. It is impossible." Ethel's light pulsed, a soft, sorrowful rhythm. "You are still thinking in terms of technology, Marshal, of sensors and processors. Consider the alternative. They did not detect us. They knew we were coming. The silicate warning was not a message they left for us. It was a message they received just as we did." The implication of Ethel's words settled over the council like a shroud. If these humans had access to the same ancient warnings and had possessed them for an equal or greater length of time, then their entire posture was not one of adolescent ignorance, but of ancient, deliberate preparation. Their chaotic world, their internal conflicts, perhaps they were not a sign of immaturity, but a component of that preparation, a forging process. Valerius silenced the internal debate with a gesture. The time for speculation was over. They had been invited to speak, and to refuse would be an admission of fear. To accept was to step into the unknown. He chose the latter. "Open a direct channel," he commanded. "I will speak with him." The Grand Executor's own form was projected into the void, a shimmering, majestic figure of gold and white, facing the simple human. He made sure to broadcast from the obsidian chamber to let the scale of the orrery and the assembled council be seen behind him, a subtle reminder of the power this man was addressing. "Ambassador Thorn," Valerius began, his voice imbued with the gravity of his office. "I am Grand Executor Valerius of the Glyptal Consensus. Your world has come to our attention. We arrive with peaceful intentions to understand the nature of your civilization and its place within the galactic community." Thorn inclined his head slightly, a gesture their archives identified as a sign of respect. "Grand Executor, a title of immense weight, I am sure. We appreciate the peaceful nature of your approach. To answer your query, our place has until now been one of observation. We have watched the stars for a very long time. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have seen the patterns, the great filters, the silence that follows the crescendo of expansion. The words were spoken without threat, but they landed like hammer blows. He was not speaking of his own species, but of theirs. He was framing the glyptal consensus not as an ultimate power, but as just another cycle, another empire approaching its peak before the inevitable decline. "You speak with the perspective of a historian," Valeria said, his voice carefully controlled. "Yet your species is young. Your recorded history is but a flicker in the span of cosmic time. How could you know of such things?" "Our history is long, grand executor, and it is written in more than just books and data files," Thorne replied. "It is written in our blood and our genes. It is encoded in the very fabric of our world. You have scanned our planet. You see a chaotic biosphere, a history of mass extinctions, of constant, brutal competition. You see a sentient species that has spent most of its existence fighting itself. You see waste. You see error. You do not see the design." Marshal Kalen took an involuntary step forward, his shadow falling over Valerius's dais. "Design," he interjected, his voice broadcast into the channel, a harsh, grating sound. "We see a world on the brink of self-destruction, a species that has poisoned its own nest. Your archives are filled with tales of apocalyptic wars and ecological collapse. That is not design. It is failure." Ambassador Thorne's gaze shifted to the Marshal, and for the first time a flicker of something other than calm appeared in his eyes. It was not anger nor fear. It was a profound, almost weary sadness. "Marshal Kalen of the Cathar, the sword of the consensus, your perspective is valued. You see the universe as a series of threats to be neutralized. You are a product of your function, as are we all, but you misunderstand the nature of a forge. A forge is a place of violence, of fire and pressure. It is not meant to be a comfortable nest. It is meant to shape metal. Our world, our history, it is a forge for consciousness itself. Every war, every plague, every heartbreak, every act of senseless violence, and every counterbalancing act of selfless compassion. They are the hammer and the anvil. They are the heat and the quenching. They are designed to create a very specific kind of mind. A mind that can withstand pressure. A mind that understands paradox. A mind that can hold both hope and despair in the same thought and not be broken. A mind that is, above all, resilient." The chamber was utterly still. Thorne's words stripped away their assumptions layer by layer. They had seen humanity's turbulent history as a disqualifier, a sign of their inferiority. The human was now reframing it as a qualification. Their greatest weakness was, in fact, their greatest strength. "A forge for what purpose?" Ethel's resonance entered the conversation, soft and inquisitive. "What is it that you are being shaped to withstand?" Thorne's eyes met the shimmering light of the Lumina's representative, and he offered a small, sad smile. "The same thing the silicates fled from Ethel of the Lumina, the same thing your own most ancient prophecies call the Great Silence. You received the warning, but you interpreted it as a historical artifact, a story. We interpreted it as a technical manual." He raised his hand, and the scene behind him changed. The view of Earth receded. The stars themselves seemed to stretch and distort. A complex, shimmering latticework of golden light bloomed into existence, overlaying the fabric of spacetime. It was a web of unimaginable complexity, centered on the Sol system. The glyptal fleet, represented by a collection of cold, blue icons, was shown to be outside this web, perceiving only its faintest, most distorted emanations. "What is this?" Valerius breathed, his multifaceted eyes struggling to process the sheer scale of the structure. It was not physical, it was something else entirely. A field, an equation made manifest. "We call it the veil," Thorne explained, his voice taking on the tone of a lecturer. "You might call it a chronoton field, a probability matrix, or a localized reality. Filter, in essence, our system does not exist in the same phenomenological state as the rest of the galaxy. It is buffered. What your sensors perceive is a shadow, an echo, a deliberately curated, low-energy version of our reality. We have kept it this way for millennia. This veil is what makes our world seem insignificant. It is what makes our technology seem primitive. It is the first layer of the trap." The engineers and scientists in the chamber began muttering, their minds racing to comprehend the implications. Manipulating spacetime on such a scale was theoretical, the domain of gods or cosmic singularities. To suggest a species that still used internal combustion engines could construct such a thing was ludicrous. "That is impossible," Kalen stated flatly. "The energy required would be greater than the output of a dozen stars. Your world would be incinerated." "The energy is not generated," Thorne corrected gently. "It is drawn from a source you have not yet considered." He gestured again, and the simulation behind him zoomed in on Earth. The shimmering continents and oceans became translucent, revealing the planet's core. But it was not a churning ball of molten iron and nickel. It was a perfect, stable sphere of incandescent, swirling light, contained within a geodesic cage of impossible geometry. "Our planet is not a natural formation, Grand Executor. It is a machine, an engine, and its purpose is to power the veil." The revelation struck the obsidian chamber with the force of a physical blow. Earth was not a planet. It was an artifact, a piece of engineering on a scale that dwarfed anything the Glyptal consensus had ever conceived. Their entire civilization, with its Dyson swarms and star-lifting engines, had never dared to dream of turning a world itself into a power source. "Who built it?" Valerius asked, his voice barely a whisper. The question was not just for the human, but for the universe itself. "We don't know," Thorn admitted freely. "We call them the progenitors. We are their inheritors, or perhaps their project. Their legacy was this world, this system, and the warning told of a coming threat, not a fleet of warships, not a devouring swarm. It spoke of a wave of negation, a phenomenon that propagates through the void and extinguishes consciousness, a song that unmakes the singer. The silicates, a race of pure, crystalline logic, encountered it. Their perfect minds could not process the paradox of uncreation. They computed their own end as the only logical escape. They shattered themselves rather than be erased." He paused, letting the weight of that cosmic horror sink in. The progenitors chose a different path. They did not build a shield of metal or a wall of energy. They built a shield of spirit. They built a forge. They engineered a biosphere of relentless struggle, forcing life to evolve not just strength of body, but strength of will. They guided the evolution of a species that would be messy, emotional, illogical, and contradictory. A species that could experience the greatest depths of despair and still choose to create a poem, a song, a future. They built us. Humanity is the weapon. Our soul is the blade. The second layer of the trap was now revealed. Not just a technological deception, but a biological and psychological one. The Glyptal consensus had come to this system expecting to find primitives. Instead, they had found the designated guardians of the galaxy, forged in a crucible of suffering for a purpose so vast it defied their entire worldview. This changes everything," Valerius said, his mind reeling. The political ramifications were staggering. The military ones terrifying, the philosophical ones world-shattering. "Yes, it does," Thorn agreed. "For a very long time we have maintained the veil, waiting. We are the trap, but not for you. You were simply the first to stumble upon the trigger mechanism with sufficient attention. The warning stated that when a galactic power grew sufficiently organized and observant to pierce the outer layers of deception, the time for isolation would be over. Your arrival is a sign, a portent. It means the threat is near." With a final gesture, Ambassador Thorn altered the projection in the orrery one last time. The image of the Sol system vanished. The glowing map of the Glyptal consensus territory appeared and then zoomed out and out further still until their entire galaxy was a glittering spiral in a sea of black. And then, at the very edge of the intergalactic void, a patch of that blackness began to deepen. It was not a shadow. It was an absence. A creeping void that was not moving through space, but erasing it, star by star, as it advanced. A wave of silent, patient, absolute nothing. "The silicate data called it the Void Hymn," Thorn said, his voice now devoid of its earlier warmth, replaced by a cold, somber gravity. "It does not travel at the speed of light. It travels at the speed of thought. And it is now close enough for a mind like yours, Ethel, to feel its precursor echoes. Is it not? The faint disharmony at the edge of perception. The cold spot in the soul of the galaxy." In the obsidian chamber, Ethel's column of light flickered violently, their psychic resonance emitting a silent scream of pure terror that flooded the minds of everyone present. They had felt it for cycles, a growing wrongness, a subtle dread they had attributed to political instability. Now they understood. They were feeling the edge of a cosmic predator's shadow. "The final hour is not upon your empire, Grand Executor," Thorn said, his gaze returning to Valerius, his face etched with a terrible shared destiny. "It is upon all of us. The warning was not for you to avoid Earth. It was for you to find it. The trap was a beacon, and you have answered its call. Now the real work begins." The revelation settled into the marrow of the Glyptal consensus, a chilling truth that reordered their universe. The humans were not the enemy. They were not a primitive race to be conquered or a mystery to be solved. They were the galaxy's immune system, a latent function activated by the proximity of a disease so profound it threatened existence itself. The obsidian chamber, once a symbol of absolute power and control, now felt like a fragile bubble in an encroaching, silent sea. The grand orrery's captured stars seemed less like trophies of empire, and more like flickering candles in an infinite wind. Marshal Kalen stood immobile, his entire martial philosophy rendered obsolete. How do you wage war against an absence? How do you deploy fleets against a concept? His lifetime of training, his people's entire cultural identity, was built around the application of force against a tangible opponent. The void him was not an opponent. It was a conclusion. He looked at the holographic image of Thorn, this soft-bodied, unassuming being, and for the first time he felt a flicker of something other than contempt or suspicion. It was a desperate, unfamiliar feeling of hope. These creatures of chaos and contradiction had been purpose-built for this. Valerius, his mind still struggling to encompass the scale of the paradigm shift, finally found his voice. The mantle of grand executor of a ruler of a stable and orderly empire felt absurdly inadequate. He was now just a leader of a people on the edge of an abyss. What is your plan?" he asked, the question a confession of his own powerlessness. "What can be done against such a thing?" Ambassador Thorn's expression softened, the immense burden of his species' purpose visible in the lines on his face. "You still think in terms of plans, of strategies, of doing. Your approach to a problem is to build a tool to solve it. A bigger ship, a stronger shield, a more precise weapon. The progenitors knew that such a threat could not be fought. It cannot be outrun or walled off. It must be endured and transformed." He gestured to the image of Earth, now restored to the orrery, the swirling blue and white orb a beacon of impossible vitality. "Your civilization is built on logic and cohesion. Your strength is your unity, your predictable order. That is why the void him is so toxic to you. It is the ultimate expression of entropy, the antithesis of order. It unravels the patterns of consciousness. But humanity, our strength is our discord. It is our ability to hold countless contradictory truths at once. We are not a perfect crystal, vulnerable to a single, resonant, shattering frequency. We are a chaotic chorus. Every mind is a different instrument playing a different tune. We are messy, unpredictable, and dissonant. He looked directly at Ethel's flickering form. The void hymn is a song of silence. It works by silencing all other vibrations, by reducing the complex symphony of a mind to a single, null tone. The only way to counter a song is with another song. Not one of perfect harmony, which could be easily canceled out, but one of infinite, resilient complexity. A song of such chaotic, stubborn, and defiant noise that it cannot be silenced. The Lumina representative, Ethel, finally stabilized their light, the silent scream in the council's minds receding. A new resonance took its place, one of dawning, terrifying comprehension. A psychic counter-resonance, Ethel vibrated. A chorus of minds broadcast as a shield. "Precisely," Thorn confirmed. "For millennia, we have honed this ability without even knowing its purpose. Our art, our music, our literature, our philosophies, our religions, they are not mere cultural artifacts. They are exercises, practice. Each one is a unique thread of consciousness, a complex waveform of emotion and thought. Love, hate, grief, joy, despair, hope. They are the notes and chords of our song. The forge of our world was not just to make us resilient, but to make us loud in a way your telepathic senses cannot yet perceive. The veil has not just been hiding us, it has been amplifying us, turning our entire species into a resonant instrument." He gestured, and the human ship, the Odyssey, which had been a tiny, unnoticed detail in the holographic display, now glowed with a soft, white light. "This vessel is not a warship. It is a tuning fork. My purpose here is to help you prepare, to help your people learn to sing in their own way. Your logic, your order, Marshal Kalen's discipline, Ethel's psychic sensitivity, these are not weaknesses. They are new instruments for the orchestra. The consensus does not need to become human. It needs to become more itself, to add its unique voice to the chorus before the silence falls." The final layer of the trap and its ultimate purpose was laid bare. Earth was never a trap for the glyptal consensus. It was a lifeboat, a seed bank of consciousness. Its isolation was a quarantine, not for the galaxy's protection, but for humanity's, allowing it to mature in its violent, beautiful crucible until the time was right. The humans were not gatekeepers or warriors. They were shepherds, awakened by the approach of the wolf, now tasked with teaching the flock to roar. Grand Executor Valerius stood, all four of his hands unclenching. The fear that had gripped him was replaced by a different emotion, something far heavier and more profound. It was the weight of a shared destiny. The political squabbles, the territorial disputes, the centuries of carefully managed imperial growth, all of it was rendered meaningless. The petty concerns of children in a house whose foundations were about to be swept away by a flood. "You have spent your entire existence preparing for this moment," Valerius said, his voice no longer that of an emperor but of a student addressing a master. "We have spent hours in blissful ignorance. Where do we begin?" The image of Ambassador Thorn offered a final, faint smile, but it was a smile of grim determination, not of triumph. "You begin by listening, not with your sensors or your probes, but with your deepest selves. You begin by accepting that the universe is not the neat, orderly place your science describes, but a place of terrifying, wondrous mystery. And you begin by standing with us, not behind us or in front of us, but beside us." The hologram faded, leaving the swirling blue image of Earth hanging once more in the center of the obsidian chamber. It no longer looked insignificant or primitive. It looked like an anchor, a bastion, a promise. Marshal Kalen stared at it, his warrior's mind slowly, painfully reconfiguring itself. The greatest battle in the history of the galaxy would not be fought with ships or guns. It would be fought in the silent spaces of the mind, and the ultimate weapon was a song. Valerius turned to his council. The faces that looked back at him were transformed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, humbling awe. The certainty had vanished, replaced by a vast, terrifying uncertainty that was, for the first time, not a source of fear, but a source of unity. They were no longer the apex of galactic civilization. They were survivors, standing on the shore of a cosmic ocean, watching the tide of darkness roll in. And beside them stood the strange, chaotic, and magnificent humans, their eyes full of the terrible light of their purpose, ready to teach the galaxy how to scream back at the encroaching night. The final hour had come, not as an end, but as the true and perhaps final beginning.